Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel Code for Tech Solutions. In our previous video, we have covered what is service discovery and the importance of using service discovery in microservice architecture. Now it's time to implement the service discovery. Now, to implement the service discovery, we have two options. We can implement the client-side service discovery or the server-side service discovery. Now in this video we are going to implement client-side service discovery using Netflix Eureka Server. Now in this we are going to create three microservices. The first microservice will act as a service discovery or service registry, which will register all the client microservices with it. And for that we are going to use Netflix Eureka Server. This is the first microservice which will register all the client microservices. Now next we are going to create two client microservices. First is a user service and other is a atom service. Now the user service, each service will have its own database. On startup, these two services will register themselves to the service registry, and the service registry will maintain the data of network IP addresses, port name, and health check URL and some other metadata with it. Now the user service, to communicate, user service wants some atom details for the user ID from the atom service. Okay, so atom service has to return the list of atoms to the user service based on what user ID is passed from the user service. Now to achieve this, the user service will not directly call the atom service. Rather, the user service will query to the service discovery to get the list of available IP addresses of the atom service, so that it will call the atom service. Now the service discovery will return back a response with the list of all the available IP addresses and port number and health check. All these details it will give to the user service. Now the user service will use round robin load balancing strategy, which is a default strategy to choose a particular service instance of the atom service. And finally the user service route the request to the atom service. Now to achieve this inter-service communication, we have various methodologies available, like we can go for the REST template web client, or we can go for the FAN client. And in this video we are going to use FAN client, which is the best for synchronous communication. Finally the atom service will process the request and it will return back the list of atoms based on the user ID to the user service. This is about the overall architecture we are going to implement to for this service discovery pattern, and we are going to implement it from scratch. Please do not forget to like, subscribe and share, and please do not forget to watch this from start to end, because I am going to show you everything from scratch, like how we can implement each and every service. And I am also going to share you the code link of the GitHub in the video description. Now let us create our service discovery microservice first, and this is the project folder. We can copy. Let us open our Spring Tool suite, and here we can give our project folder name and click on launch button. Now here we can select our third option, which is create new Spring Starter project. Now here we need to give our application name, which is a service discovery in our case. We can select the type as a Maven, packaging as a jar, language as a Java, and for Java version I am going to use 21, so I will select 21, and for group we can use com.discovery. For description we can select like it's a service discovery for microservices, and package we can select com.discovery. You can check it once, and once everything is fine, you can click on next button. Now on the next page we need to select the packages or library which we are going to use. Now first we can select the Spring Web. Next we want to make this service as a Eureka server, so we need to add Eureka server related dependency, and this much is enough. Now we can click on next button. and click on finish. Here we can see service discovery project is successfully created with all the default files and folders. Let us cross check the dependency in pom.xml file. So here we are using Java version 21, and inside dependencies we can see this is all the dependency we have just added. This is the Spring Web and this is Netflix Eureka server. Now here it is showing the rate for POM, so we can replace HTTP with HTTPS just to remove the error. Now it seems good. Now to make this as an Eureka server, we need to add some annotations at the class level, like we can use enable Eureka server. This annotation we need to add and we can save it. Now next change we need to do, like we need to create one properties file. So we can either add into application.properties or we can create one YAML file for application. Let us create one new file with name application.yaml, and inside that we need to add some entries like as every microservice should have its own port, so we can define some port like server.port. We can select this option and here we can give some port like 8760. Next we need to mention some name for this application, and here we can give the application name like it's a, we can give service -discovery. This is the service name. Next, like we are going to mention Eureka server related entry, like we are going to use eureka.client.register with Eureka. This is the property and we are going to make it as a false. Next property we can use like fetch registry, and that again we are going to make it as a false. Now here it is showing some indentation error, so we can resolve this and we can save it. With this we are done with our discovery service. What all things we have done, like we have added Netflix Eureka server dependency and Spring Web. Next we have made this class as an enabled Eureka server so that it will act as an service discovery, and finally inside our application YAML we have added these many properties like its a port number is a different, this is the application name, and for Eureka client register with Eureka as a false because this service is going to act as a server or service registry. Hence it is not going to register itself with some other service. That's why we have made it as a false, and page registry again we have made it false, and we can save it. Now let us build this application and run it and check how it goes. Now we can right click on the project name and select run as Maven install. Now we can see the build is success. Now let us run it by using run as Spring Boot app. Now we can see it has started successfully on port 8761. Now let us run this and check. We can use this URL http localhost 8761, and this is the Eureka Netflix Eureka dashboard we are using, and here you can see instances currently registered with Eureka. Right now it is not showing any application instances because we have just created our Eureka server, and once we create a client microservices, that will get registered with the Eureka microservice, and then those instances will appear or reflected here. Right now we do not have any client microservice as of now, that's why it is not showing any instance here. So this is about our first microservice we have created successfully. Now let us create our first client microservice, which is item service. For that we can right click on this, and here we can select the new and Spring Starter project. Here we can give our service name, which is atom-service, and we can keep as is. Here we can change com.atom. Here we can, in description we can say atom service client microservice, or atom service client Eureka client we can say. For package we can use com.atom. You can cross check it once, and everything is, if everything is fine, we can click on next button. On the next page we can add what all dependency we require, like we need Spring Web. Next we are going to make it as a client for Eureka client, so we can add Eureka Discovery client. Next we are going to use S2 database. For this we can add. Next we are going to add Spring Data JPA, and we are going to add Lombac dependency. Now this much is enough. Once now this much is enough, we can click on next button and click on finish button. Now we can see it has created atom service successfully, and this is the package structure for that one. So we can cross check the dependency once. Here we have Spring Data GPA, Spring Web, Netflix Eureka client. This service is going to become a client service, client microservice. That's why we have added this dependency. This is the H2 database which we are going to use for this. This is the Lombac, just to reduce boilerplate code, and we can make use of data setter using this. And this much is enough the dependency. Now we can remove this error. We can add HTTPS it here, and we can save it. Now we can add, first thing we can do, like we need to make it as a Eureka client. So for that we can use this annotation enable. We can say enable discovery client. This is the annotation we need to add. Next thing, like we need to add properties file. So we can delete the existing properties file, and let us copy the property file which is there inside service discovery, and we can add and make the changes related to the atom service. Now we can change the port number. Let's say we can give port number 8081, and here application name we can keep as an atom-service. For this, like we can make it as a true, because we need to register this client with the Eureka server, so we can make it as a true. Next thing, we need to add few more entries, like because we are going to use service URL, we need to add. And for that we need to use our Eureka service discovery URL, and here we can use Eureka. Next thing, here we need to add data source as well. So for service URL we need to add default zone. and for this we can add this. So there is some indentation related issues, so we can resolve it. Now we need to add data source as well, so for that we can add URL first, which is we can use jdbc colon h2 in memory database, and here we can give some database name, like let's say atom_db. We can give this as a database name. We need to add driver class name, and for that we can use org.h2.driver. Next we can add username, let's say dev, and password dev @123, and here we can add h2 console and enabled as a true, so that we can see see the database console in the browser. And for path we can use /h2 -console. Now finally we need to add a JPA related entry like JPA, and we can use hibernate ddl ito as an update. Next we can use like show SQL as a true, and finally we can use database platform as an org.hibernate.dialect.h2 dialect. Now to resolve this indentation related issue, we can open the notepad ++, and we can replace the tab with two places, and we can replace all. We have just removed the tab which is not allowed, and due to which it was showing the error, so we can replace it. Fine. Now we can save it. So this is the properties for this item service. It has some port 8081, and we have made it as a Eureka client as a true, and this is the like Eureka server URL to which it will get registered, and this is the data source name. We are going to use h2 database and atom_db as a database name, and these are some JPA Hibernate related properties including the dialect. You can save it. Now let us create our packages first for item service. So let us create entity package. Next we are going to use a repository. We need service package, and finally we need controller package. Now let us create our entity class first. Here we can use atom as an entity class, and here we can add a required annotation like all are constructors, no are constructors, data, getter setters, and the main annotation, which is the entity, we can use, and we can save it. We need to add import for all these. Next thing, like we need to mention what all properties we are going to use. Like first is a private long ID, private string name, next is a quantity, as this is related to atoms, we are going to use quantity, and we can add one more property, which is price. And finally, to track the user ID related data, we need to add one more property, which is like user ID, and we can save it. Now here we need to add ID annotation it here, and we can use generated value. Inside that we can use strategy as an generation type, and we can select auto, and we can save it. With this we are done with our entity creation. Now let us create our repository part. We can select, and this is the interface we are going to create, and our interface name is atom repository, and this is going to extend like JPA repository, and here it is going to use atom class and a data type of the primary key, which is long. Here we can add a repository annotation, and we can add the import for the same. Save it. With this we are done with our repository class creation. Now let us create one service interface first, and here we can use atom service, and inside that we are going to mention what all methods we are going to use. Like first is get all list, get all atoms, which will return list of atom. Next we are going to add a new atom. We can say add atom, so new atom, and finally we are going to return the list of atoms based on the user ID. We can say get atoms by user ID, and we can save. So these many methods are enough. For this to get the atoms based on user ID, we need to pass the ID, which is user ID. You can save. Now let us create one implementer class for atom service. So what all methods we have added, and this will return all the list available in the database for atom. This will allow us to create a new atom in the database, and this will return all the list of atoms related to the user ID. Now let us create one implementer class. For this we can name it like atom service IMPL, which will implement our atom service interface methods, and we can add here, provide the implementation for all these methods. We can annotate this class with service stereotype, and we can add import for the same. Now let us provide the actual implementation for all these default methods. For that, first we are going to use auto add, and here we are going to use our atom service repository, atom repository, Now here we can, this method will return all the atoms, list of atoms, and we can call find all on the repository. This method will add atom into the database. We can call save method, and we can add a new atom which is an input. This atom will get saved into the database. And finally here we can add like return item repository dot. Now inside a repository we need to add one method for this now. So this is our repository inside which we can add one custom method which will return list of atoms, and that method is find atoms by user ID. This is the method name we are going to use, and based on the user ID it is going to return the list of atoms, and we can save it. It should be long. This is the custom method which will return all the atoms, list of atoms for this user ID. Now let us provide implementation for the same, like we can call the method which is available like find atoms by user ID, and we can pass this user ID. We are done with our service level implementation part. Now let us create our controller. Now here we can create one controller class with name atom controller. You can finish. Now let us make it as a REST controller. Next thing here we can add, like here we can use private. We need to inject the atom service inside controller so that we can call methods available on the atom service. Now let us add one gate mapping. Here we can use the endpoint, let's say atoms, which will return the list of item, and the method name we can say get all atoms. We do not need to pass any input param, and here it should return, it should call the method, appropriate method on this atom service. This is the method it should call. Can add the import for these two, seems good. Now here instead of returning, we can return the response entity which will wrap the return type of list of atoms, and same we are going to return response entity dot OK, inside which we are going to add our response. Now we can add import for this response entity. So this is for getting all the atoms. Similar way we can add our post method which will allow us to add new atom into the database, and to add that it should return only individual atom which is added to the database, and here we can say add atom. It's a method name. Here we are going to use request body, and for this like we are going to pass atom, input atom which we are going to save into the database, and here we are going to use add atom method, and we are going to pass this atom so that it will get added into the database. and we can add import for this post mapping. Now let us add one more get mapping which will return the list of atoms based on the user ID. Now here we can say, here we are going to pass user ID, and we can say method name get atoms by user ID. Here we need to add path variable and path variable which is of type long user ID, and here we can call the respective method get atoms by ID, and inside that method we are going to pass the user ID which is the input, and we can save it. With this we are done with our controller part. Now what all things we have added inside controller. So first we have created atom controller which is a REST controller, and this is the get all atoms which will return all the atoms available inside the database, and this will allow us to create a new atom into the database, and this method will return list of atoms based on the user ID. It will fetch all the atoms related to this user ID. Now let us build this and check how it goes. Now we can build it using maven install. Okay, it's a build success. Now let us run it using run as Spring Boot app. Now we can see our atom service is successfully run on 8081 port. Now let us check it here. We have started the service. Now it should register one application instance. Now we can see atom service instance is appearing it here to our Eureka dashboard. Okay. Now this is the client service which is registered with the Eureka registry, and this is the dashboard which is showing all the instances which are registered to the Eureka registry. Okay, fine. Now next thing we can test with Postman and check how it goes, if all the endpoints or REST controller endpoints are working as expected or not. Now here we can check by calling 8081 whether it is showing all the atoms. This is the body, and we can click on send button. Now it is showing on the empty list because we have not added any atom as of now. So let us add some atom using post. Now here we can use atom name, let's say Inspiron, and we can add quantity integer 2, and we can add price for this one, let's say 20,000.50, and finally we can add user ID as well. Let's say it's a 1, and let us hit the send button and check. Seems good, it has added one entry. Similar way we can add HP laptop, and quantity we can say 3 quantities, price we can say 22, and user ID we can say 2. Seems good. Now let us add apple, quantity 4, price is 50,000, and user ID we can keep as is 2. Let us add one more entry because for user ID 2 we want to keep number of records, and here we can add del, quantity as an 3, and here we can use 45,000, and we can keep user ID as a 2. Seems good. Now if we call the get method, it should show all the list available. Yes, we have these many records available. Now we have these many records available. Now if you try to get for user ID 2, it will show only these many records, 3 records. Now it is showing 2. So this is for user ID 1 and these 3 are for user ID 2. Now let us check by clicking on send button. Now it is showing 3 records for user ID 2. That means all our APIs are working fine and we have tested using Postman. With this we are done with our item service, which we have created as an client microservice and registered with our service discovery. Now let us create our third microservice, which is a user service and which will act as an client microservice and which will get registered with Eureka server. Now the name of the service is a user -service, and here we can choose type as a Maven, packaging as a jar, language Java, version we can choose 21, and here for group we can use com.user, and here we can say Spring Boot user service for description, and for package we can add com.user. You can cross check it once, and once you find everything is fine, then you can click on next button. Now on the next page we need to define what all dependencies we are going to use, like we require Spring Web and we need like Spring Data JPA, and we are going to use Eureka Discovery client because this service itself is going to act as an Eureka Discovery client. Next we are going to use like H2 database, so we can add that. Next for inter-service communication we are going to use OpenFame, so we need to add this. Next, like we are going to use Lombac, and this much is enough. Now we can click on next button and click on finish button. Now you can see user service is created successfully. Now let us cross check the dependency once. We have Spring Data JPA, Spring Web, Netflix Eureka client, OpenFame, H2 database, Lombac. This much is enough. Now let us resolve this error, red color, so we can use HTTPS instead of HTTP. Now to make this service as an Eureka client, we need to add annotation like enable discovery client for this class, which is a starter class. Next thing, like we need to add application.yaml file. We can remove this existing app.properties file, application properties, and let us copy the application YAML from the item service and we can paste it here, and we can make the changes accordingly related to the user service. We can change the port name from, we can keep 8082 and we can change the name, which is a user service, and here we can keep register with Eureka as a true and fetch registry as a true, because this service is going to act as an Eureka discovery client. That's why we need to make this as a true. Now this is the Eureka server URL, this is the data source we are going to use, and database name we can use user_db, and the rest of the things we can keep as is. This is the H2 and this is the JPA, and the dialect the same H2 database we are going to use, so we are keeping H2 dialect. So we are done with our configuration part in application.yaml file. Now let us create the packages first. For this we can first create our entity package. Next we are going to create our repository package. Next we are going to create our service package, and next we are going to create our controller package. Apart from these packages, we are also going to create one model package, because what items we are going to return from our item service, that we need to accommodate or capture in our user service. So for that we can use model package. Now Let us create our entity class first, and we can give entity class name like user details. Let us add necessary annotations. We can copy those annotations from here. And we can edit it here. And next, like, we can copy this part and we can make respective changes. Like here, this is the long ID, which is, we can say it's a user ID, and this is the string name as is, and here we can use string and it should be location, and these two fields are not needed, we can remove this. Now this is our user details, we can save it. So we are done with our entity creation for user details. Now let us create our repository. For that we can create an interface with name user repository. Here we can annotate it using repository, and this interface should extend JPA repository, and here we can use user details, and here for type we can use long, and we can add imports for all this and we can save it. With this we are done with our user repository creation. Now next thing, we can create our service interface first. We can name it like user service, and inside that we can add all the necessary methods which we are going to use. Now first we are going to add list of user details, which is like get all users we are going to use. Next, for user creation we can use user details, and we can say create user, and here we can add user details. It's a new user we are going to create. And finally we can add one more method which will return list of items, and here we can use get items by user ID. This is the method, and here we need to pass long user ID. Now we need to create this atom in our user service as well. Now let us copy the atom data from here, from atom service, and add into our user service. Now here is a model. Here we need to create one atom class, and here we can add this one. Now ID annotation and all is not needed because it is just a plain atom bean class, and here we can keep as is. Now here okay. Now let us add this much getter, setter and all to our atom class and save it. Now let us, this is our service, and here we need to add import our atom class which is there in model package. Now let us create our implementer class, like we can say it's a user service IMPL, and this class should implement our user service interface, and here we can add service as a stereotype annotation. we can add all the unimplemented methods, and here we can use AutoWire like and as we are going to create the means in order to achieve the inter-service communication, like user service wants to communicate with Atom service to get some Atom details based on a user. So for that we need to use some mechanism, and here we are going to use Fen client for that. Like we need to create one Atom like service Fen client class. So let us create this class first. And we can create inside service this class with name. And we can use annotation like Fen client. Inside that we are going to use name, which is like Atom service we are going to call, and what is the URL for that, like which is HTTP localhost, and the port name is 8081. This is the URL for that one. And actually this is not the class, rather it is an interface, and inside that we are going to add one method which is like get mapping, and for that here we need to add endpoints, like it's atoms slash, for the given user ID we are going to return the atoms. So this is the endpoint, and here we are going to add, it will return list of atoms, and method name like get atoms by user ID. Here we need to pass the path variable and for path variable we need to pass like it's a user ID, and this is of type long user ID. That's it, and we can save it, and we need to add necessary imports like this one. Now we have created a Fen client. Fen client will allow us to achieve inter-service communication because our user service is going to call the Atom service. For that we have created Atom service Fen client, and using this Fen client our user service will give a call to our Atom service. Okay, and this is the method which we are going to call. Now let us complete our user service. So this is the Fen client we have added. We need to add import for this one. We can copy it and use as is. Now we can use auto add, and here we can use public constructor. We can use, and inside that we can add this is the atom pane client, and we can assign this with and we can save it. With this we are done with our pane client injection inside our user service simple class. Now let us call the respective methods. Like here it should return all the users which are there inside user repository. Next here we are going to return like user repository.save method we are going to call, and here it will add new user to the database. Finally here we are going to call user repository dot now here we need to call like here we need to use this pane client, okay, and that we are going to call get atoms by user ID, and here we are passing this user ID, and we can save it. So with this we are done with our service simple class. Now let us create our controller, user controller. Here we can use new create class, and here this is our user controller. Now here we can add our REST controller to this, and we can add one get mapping. And here add some path name, like it should be like atoms, and we are going to pass some user ID which will return, like here we can add a response entity, and inside that it should return list of atoms. And it should return now here we need to inject our service first. Private user service, now we can call the method which is there on user service, like get atom by user ID. And here we are going to pass for path param we can change the method name, like we can give method name get atoms by user ID, and here we are going to pass path variables. And we are going to use long user ID for this one as a param, and this user ID we need to pass as an input to this service method. And we need to add import for response entity. Here new is not needed and we can save it. Now with this we are done with our user controller. Now let us run and check how it goes. Let us build it using Maven install, and it is running on port which is 8082. Okay. Okay. No qualifying type for. There is some error for fan client. Error creating the user controller. Let us cross check it once, like name as an atom service, and here URL which is http localhost 8081. This is the interface, and this is the get mapping. This is the user ID we are passing. Now let us comment out the test for the time being and check. Seems good. Now it's a build success. Now let us check our target folder. It has created the jar. So we can go to target, and this is our user service jar file. It has created successfully, and as we are using Spring Boot, it will use the embedded Tomcat. Now let us run it by using run as Spring Boot. Now let us check our user service. Here we have enabled discovery client. Similar way, for the user service we need to enable enable fan clients, because this is what we are going to use to call the atom service from the user service. So we need to add this annotation. Now let us check it. Now let us check it once again. We can close this and let us rebuild it. Now let us run it. Now seems good. It has run successfully. Now let us check to our dashboard. So here it is showing as expected. Now this is the user service and this is the atom service. Both the client services are registered successfully with Eureka service registry. Okay. Now let us test it using Postman. Now let us check the controller of user, like this is the atoms and user ID we are going to pass. Now let us check. Here this is for 8081 is for atom service. Now let us create one more for our user service. So for user service we have port number 8082 and after atoms we are going to pass the user ID. For the user ID 2, let us check how it shows. This is the get method and this is the same, we are passing user ID. It should return list of atoms as a response. Okay, so here 8081 we have atoms. After atoms we need to pass the user ID. And this is the get method. Let us check what has happened. Okay, so no serializer found for this atom class. That means no properties discovered. So let us go to atom class. And this is our model atom class. Now here getter setter are not properly created, so let us do that manually. Select all and we can generate. Now save it. Let us run it again. Seems good. Now check with our dashboard. We have two services. Now let us check with our get API with atoms. Seems good. Now this is the 8082, that means user service we are calling, and for this user service to get all the atoms for this user ID 2, we have passed this user ID and it is showing all the atoms which are there for user ID 2. Now we have 3 records for user ID 2. If we cross check on the atom service, here we can see for 2 this is for user ID 1 and for 2 user ID 2 we have 3 records. This is user ID 2, we have 3 records. So with this our user service is calling atom service successfully with the help of service discovery. I hope you must have enjoyed this. Please do not forget to like, subscribe and share. Thank you so much for watching this.